you dealing with fear? Do you have a dream to maybe write a book, or maybe to start coaching, or to start your own business, or to do something adventurous, or to do something that you know that you ought to do, but for some reason you won't? And that's because you are allowing fear to stop you. So years ago, I went to a conference and I met this multi-millionaire business owner, and I was lucky enough to ask him a question in the lobby. I was actually just walking around and saw him and was like, "Oh my goodness, that I know who that is." And so I went to him and I said, "Hey," one, I had to wait in line, so I waited in line for quite some time, and I had a question I was ready to ask him. And so finally, when it was my turn, I introduced myself and I said, "Hey, I just have a question. What's the difference between successful people and unsuccessful people?" And you know what he told me? He said, "James, the difference between successful people and unsuccessful people is that even when successful people are scared, they still do it." So that's what I'm talking about today is, why are you allowing fear to stop you from moving forward in your life, to doing what you know you should be doing, but then also to keep you feeling regret? If you look back at the years, you may feel regret on, why have I not written that book yet? Why have I not started on that thing? Why have I not taken the leap? And there's a reason why. And it's because you are allowing fear to stop you. You have to remember that it's not just in the activity, because if it was in the activity, then you would do it. But it's really in your identity. And as I stood there, after this gentleman answered my question, it just really made me think. It made me reflect on, what am I afraid of? Why am I afraid? And I need to do something about it. Because you have to remember, God hasn't given you a spirit of fear. Just want to make sure you heard that. God has not given you a spirit of fear. But what you can have is a spirit of faith, of peace, of love, of joy, and to really live in that fruit of the Spirit. Because you have to remember, when you take that leap and do what God's called you to do and be who God has called you to be, then you are literally like stepping over fear into faith. But you have to anchor that fear in submission to God's faithfulness. So, prime example, when I wrote my book, Painformation, I had a tremendous amount of fear in the beginning, because it was like, oh man, what are people going to say? Is this going to work? Is anybody going to read it? Is anybody going to like it? Oh, I shouldn't do it. This is a bad idea. It was all these thoughts that were coming into my mind. But what you have to do is you have to recognize that these thoughts are just thoughts, right? It's not the truth. It's called limiting beliefs. And so you have to recognize those limiting beliefs. As Jesus said, his sheep will hear his voice. And so you have to distinguish who is saying those things. Is that voice of God? Would God speak to me that way? Or is that voice of fear and of temptation? So that's what I would encourage you to do. And if I would have stopped because of fear, then I wouldn't have been able to write this book, in which it's helped a tremendous amount of people. And I'll just read a paragraph from it. Let's see here, just to be helpful. So just something like this. We mess up all the time. We'll continue to mess up because we're not Jesus. This part of Jesus' life is excruciating for me to read. And what I read was about, what I wrote down, in the book was about in the Garden of Gethsemane, when Jesus is praying before he went to the cross. So this is me talking about that. Every time I think about how we as humans left Christ alone, I feel embarrassed and shameful. Thank God for his grace, mercy, and forgiveness. Though Christ was about to endure pain and suffering, he reached out to others and God the Father. My point is, we need to reach out to loved ones when we're hurting. We can't place our faith in them. Why? Because we're people. Jesus didn't ask Peter, James, and John to run a marathon with their legs tied together through an obstacle course while blindfolded. He asked them to pray. However, tiredness and fatigue overpowered their desire to support and encourage. So we must ask others for support and love even though they may fail. Now, the reason why I read that is because this portion of the book was talking about how when you need help, you can ask others to help you. But knowing that those other people that you may ask, they may let you down. But like, I never would have gotten that point across. I've never would have been able to share that message to others if I would have let fear stop me. So all that to say is, you are sensing God calling you to do something. There's something that you are supposed to start. There's something that you should be doing, and you know you should be doing it. You've been putting it off every single week, every single month, every single year. You've been putting this off, and you know it. It's bothering you. It's in your mind. It's gnawing at you. It's like a rock in your shoe. You can't get away from it. You can't let it go, but yet you will not start. So the truth really comes to this question. How much longer do you believe that God will keep bringing things in your life for you to start this? Or should he just choose someone else? How much longer in your life do you believe God will keep bringing people to bring this up to you? Maybe things in your life to help you remember to get this thing started? Or should he just choose someone else? Because you're letting fear stop you. So, wrapping up. If you allow fear to stop you from doing what God's called you to do and being who he's called you to be, then you will live with regret. There's no question about it. But if you're the type of person that is believing that you go, hey, I'm going to hear, well done, my good and faithful servant. I'm going to use my gifts to my best abilities. I'm going to be the type of person that's there for my family, that's there for my job or for my business, that's there for the Lord, that's there for others. If you're going to be that type of person, then you have to understand fear. And you have to recognize when those limiting beliefs come in your mind, and then you have to diagnose them and treat them. The best way that I treat fear when it comes in my mind, because it does come to my mind. Like, I'm human too, okay? Like, I get fearful. I become fearful over some things, but I have to think about who has God called me to be. And I recognize immediately that that's not the voice of God. That's fear. And so then I say a few Bible verses, I pray, and I get going because I know what's on the other side versus me like giving up. Like, what's at stake? Like, I know what's at stake if I don't do this. If I don't do this, I'm not going to reach the people I'm supposed to reach. And I want to use every single ounce of the gifts that God has given me. So if you're going to be the type of person that crushes fear and to move forward, then you are going to be the type of person that God is going to continue to bless, because you want to be faithful over little, then you will be faithful over much. And with that said, don't let fear stop you, and you are one slant away from changing your life.